YouTube? This is your friend, the neighborhood movie nerd, back to give you guys everything that is going on in the world of movies and TV. And people, it's that time of year again. That time where we get to talk about the best and the worst movies of the year. It's January, which is typically the dead month. It's a month that most people just catch up on the movies that they missed from last year. And it's a month that studios usually dump some of the worst movies that we've ever seen, which makes this a perfect time for me to give you guys some of the worst movies that I saw from last year. 2020 was already a terrible enough year, and 2021 is already getting off to a fantastic start. And so in order to contribute to just the overall cycle of shittiness, I'm gonna talk to you guys about some of the worst movies that I saw from last year. The shittiest of the shitty, if you will. Because for as many good movies that came out last year, and there were a lot of good movies, there were just as many bad ones. I won't be covering my favorite TV shows or movies in this format. If you want to see that, you guys will have to tune into the podcast. But in the meantime, sit back and get ready. These are the Movie Nerd's official top 10 worst movies of 2020. And the award for, look mom, it's the 80s, goes to Wonder Woman 1984. How the hell did Patty Jenkins screw this up? Actually, you know what? Why am I even asking that? Look, I want to make you guys aware of something. The first Wonder Woman was not a great movie. It was good. It borrowed a lot from other Marvel movies that made the stuff work better. But yeah, it always kind of amazed me how people just let the very obvious problems of that movie slide just for the simple fact that it was the first female superhero movie. This movie just took that to a whole new level though. Besides the obvious metaphor of 80s consumerism, the movie once again goes out of its way to reinforce a set of really bad cliches and tropes that should have gone away a long time ago, on top of the fact that it feels even more so for 9-year-old girls, because yes, that's what Wonder Woman should be striving to teach young girls. That being a superhero means being so depressed that you don't want to interact with anybody, and when you have a chance to make a wish, you literally wish your dead boyfriend back to life, because that screams healthy relationships. So the effects in this movie were terrible, the action in this movie was terrible, there were points where I literally felt like I was watching a Sam Raimi movie. Kristen Wiig's cheetah subplot is literally rinse and recycling Jamie Foxx's Electro subplot from Amazing Spider-Man 2, and in a weird way, the HBO Max dump was probably the best thing that could have happened to this movie. And this was a movie that was already getting screwed 7 different ways from Sunday for reasons that, for once in the DC canon, had nothing to do with the movie's actual production. And the award for the Oscar bait movie that's really just 2 hours of people shouting is Hillbilly Elegy. Oh my god, Ron Howard. What the hell? You know, I shouldn't really be surprised that he chose this as his next project, because nothing says coming-of-age American story like super right-wing material. The movie, which is based on the memoir written by J.D. Vance, sees his coming up and dealing with his heroin addict mother and his grandmother, all while he tries to make a better name for himself in the modern day. And this movie is filled to the gills with bad Oscar cliche after bad Oscar cliche. Overhyped dramatic material, people yelling at each other in order to try and display some form of complex emotions when it's really just beyond simplified subject matter. Characters telling you things that are supposed to be really deep but really aren't. You know what it felt like at points? This movie felt like I was watching a parody of an Oscar movie, one of the fake trailers from the beginning of Tropic Thunder. And probably the most depressing thing about this is that Amy Adams and Glenn Close are probably going to be nominated for this because they both never won an Oscar, which is ridiculous to think about. And it really sucks because even though this material is terrible, they're still giving good performances. And the award for the We Think We're Smarter Than Our Audience goes to Antebellum. A movie that feels like what happens when 2 amateur filmmakers saw Get Out, went home, snuffed a Scarface-sized mountain of cocaine and said, we can do that, but better. And the final result ended up being something resembling the bastard child of Get Out and The Village. And the reason why I compare it to The Village is because both twists in that movie were for shock value only and made absolutely no sense. The movie follows Janelle Monáe's titular character, who starts off the movie on a slave plantation until about halfway through when it cuts to her in the modern day, which leads us to wonder, well gee, how did she get from the modern day to slave times? And the answer is so ridiculous that I won't dare spoil it here because I already did it in my actual review. And look, what I will say is that these filmmakers certainly show that they have potential when it comes to shooting a movie. Like, they certainly know how to set up a camera and how to set up the proper lighting as far as getting the intended dramatic effect. But all of that goes out the window the minute that you find out that these guys are trying to make a message movie in the worst possible way. Like, these guys really do get extra props for just like how stupid this movie ended up being at the end, because this movie almost fit into the so bad it's good category. And the award for the what the fuck is this movie goes to The Witches. Look, Robert Zemeckis has given us some absolutely timeless American classics. The Back to the Future trilogy, Forrest Gump, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Castaway, Death Becomes Her. But with his last couple of movies, he has shown that he is losing his goddamn mind, particularly with Welcome to Marwen. And I didn't think it was possible to get stranger than Welcome to Marwen, which if you guys haven't seen that movie, check it out if you get a chance. I highly recommend it. Until I saw what he did with this movie. And what I'll say is that the source material that this movie is based on, the Roald Dahl book, is already like one of the darkest children's books that's ever been written. And it was already adapted into a pretty good movie released in 1990 that Frank Oz did. And this movie, of course, does what every modern day blockbuster does, which is replace the impeccable stop motion puppet effects with CG. And it being dumped on HBO Max did it no favors at all. Look, all that I can really say about this movie is I was just sitting there just baffled and trying to understand what it is that I was watching. I'm not even gonna try and break down the plot because again, you could just go read the book and get a fairly thorough understanding of it. And yeah, this movie just sucked and it was kind of hilarious, but not in a good way. I have no idea what the hell Anne Hathaway was doing acting wise, aside from one other actor that I'll talk about soon on this list, like just levels of actors who were giving it all for absolutely nothing. And yeah, this movie ends with Chris Rock voicing a mouse and basically showing off propaganda films for kids to go out and kill witches. That should tell you something about this movie. And the award for the latest lame Seth Rogen movie goes to An American Pickle, another HBO Max dump. We're 3 for 3 right now. And yeah, so with his latest effort, Seth Rogen decides to mix the ideas of Captain America, but if he had to deal with woke culture instead of aliens and supervillains. The basic premise is that Rogen portrays Herschel Goldblatt as a Russian immigrant who gets stuck in a vat of pickle brine for 200 years and wakes up in the modern day, and has to deal with, of course, fish out of water, modern day sensibilities that we've seen in so many different comedies. And look, Seth Rogen has been super hit or miss recently. I actually really liked Long Shot last year, but this was just not a good movie. It recycles comedy tropes that you've seen a million times before, does that thing that movies always do where they try to have a deep and thorough understanding when really it's just a bunch of jokes that you've seen written for sketches before, and ultimately isn't funny, which is really depressing when you think about the fact that Seth Rogen was single-handedly responsible for 5 of the funniest comedies of the last 20 years. I really don't have that much to talk about with this movie. It's just really sad that one of my favorite comic stars has gone this low now. And the award for the latest David Ayer gangland fantasy goes to The Tax Collector. Look, I don't know what David Ayer's problem is, but he wants to be a thug member living in LA so badly that I think it might be a disease at this point. And don't get me wrong, his last couple movies have been bad. But you know that you fucked up when you make Suicide Squad look watchable by comparison. The movie follows Bobby Soto and Shia LaBeouf as tax collectors for a crazy, super evil drug cartel in LA. Bobby Soto, you know, he's the family man. And then in comes the super evil rival who's gonna come up and mess everything up. This movie was so deep, dark, depressing, and just unnecessarily violent that I thought I was watching Sons of Anarchy at points. And that's gonna sound like a compliment because I know a lot of people like Sons of Anarchy, but trust me, that's an insult. Yeah, this movie definitely falls into the camp of trying to be so serious that it's comical at points. And then when it's not, it's just so depressingly dark with plot points that just make no sense. Poor Shia LaBeouf is, of course, acting his ass off in a part that he claims is a white character when it's so obviously not. And yeah, David Ayer has just been stuck in this so long and he just got turned off by working on the big budget movies that he did that he just decided to go back to his roots quite literally. And oh man, definitely doesn't bode well for his future as a filmmaker, let me tell you that. And the award for the latest lame Netflix action movie with no action in it goes to The Old Guard. This is following up a string of Netflix movies that have been coming out the last couple of years, the most notable ones being Triple Frontier and Extraction. Unlike those movies, this movie was based off a pretty popular graphic novel from what I understand. And also, unlike those two movies, this movie barely has any action in it, which still confuses me as to why so many people like this movie. When it came out over the summer, it came out the same weekend as Palm Springs, and I know a lot of people watch it and enjoyed it. And I watch it and I'm like, oh my god, this is the same schlocky soap opera bullshit that I've had to sit through with almost every other Netflix property, which is really sad because Charlize Theron is the lead of this. This movie should by all rights be awesome. The basic premise of the movie is that Charlize Theron is the leader of this group of mercenaries who are revealed to be these immortal invulnerables who have been alive for like millions of years, and how they're basically coming into conflict with enemies now in the modern day who seek to try and weaponize their immortality, on top of the fact that they discover that there's a new immortal that's just discovered her abilities, portrayed by Kiki Lane. And yeah, for a premise that sounds that awesome, this movie is really friggin' lame. Half the time, Charlize and her band are just complaining about the fact that they're so old and that they can't die and that humanity is just not changed and gotten worse and that it's pointless for them to help. And then the other half the time is her trying to train Kiki Lane, who of course doesn't want to be immortal, and it just gets really irritating. And throughout all this, I'm just wondering, where the hell is the shooting? Because again, for a movie that's touted as an action movie, there's 2 major action sequences in this. And poor Harry Melling. Harry Melling really kicked ass this year as far as Netflix properties go, between The Devil All the Time and The Queen's Gambit. But man, he was just not hitting it for this one. Yeah, this movie, the only reason why this movie is this low on this list is because this is just so many, because this is a movie that I wasn't expecting to be this bad and just fell victim to so many bad cliches that I'm just beyond sick of. And the award for the latest bad young adult adaptation goes to Artemis Fowl. Now granted, I will say this is probably the only movie that I feel like everyone knew was gonna be bad. Hell, even Disney knew this was gonna be bad. That's why they just dumped this to Disney Plus. But me personally, I have been more than conditioned that if an adaptation of a book that I loved as a kid is coming out, 9 out of 10 shot it's gonna be bad. Percy Jackson already ruined that enough for me. But I think the most disappointing thing about this movie is the fact that the book series that it's based on seemed right for adaptation. They got this 12-year-old Irish billionaire who's also a genius and also not a good person that literally kidnaps a fairy in order to extort them for their goal. And that's just the first book. And for this movie to turn into yet another Kenneth Branagh washed over bullshit CG-filled nightmare is just so sad. The lead actor is just the latest in a long line of bland British kid actors, acting opposite some pretty decent actors who are coated in CG, uttering absolute nonsense dialogue. It really sucks because if Kenneth Branagh actually put the same amount of thought and effort and love that he put into his Shakespeare adaptations, this movie would actually be pretty good. But alas, nobody had faith in this. Kenneth Branagh didn't have faith in this. Disney didn't have faith in this. It's even funnier because this movie and also The Old Guard before this were both setting up for sequels that will never happen. And the award for the latest hilariously bad reboot goes to Blumhouse's Fantasy Island. Oh man, I still remember seeing this movie in theaters pre-COVID, and this was probably the best comedy that I saw all year. Oh man, Jeff Wadlow, from his inception days of directing Kick-Ass 2, knows how to do schlock. Like, I don't know what it is about him. He is able to take just like the most bafflingly insane premises and make just the schlockiest schlock of them all. The movie follows the basic premise of the original Fantasy Island TV series, which is that 5 people show up to a random island and are courted by the island's mysterious owner, Mr. Rourke, who basically puts each of them into their own individualized fantasies, which are really strange. Like, this one girl's fantasy is to terrorize her former school bully. And the movie, of course, proceeds down the path of just utter insanity, complete bullshit twists, ridiculous reveals, and an ending that would make every diehard Lost fan proud. Look, I'm not gonna talk too long about this movie because it's been so long since it came out, almost everybody has forgotten about it. But the only thing that I will say is that if there is one movie that wins the so bad it's good award of the year, it is absolutely this movie. And the number 1 worst movie of the year, the worst of the worst, the shittiest of the shitty, the movie that wins the award for why do we keep giving this director chances is without a doubt Capone. Look, I'm gonna preface by saying this. I don't think that Josh Trank getting all the hate that he gets is entirely earned, because I do still want to give him credit where credit is due. I still love Chronicle. I still think that movie is an absolute phenomenon. Everything that he was able to do with it, despite the very questionable tactics of the movie's screenwriter. And I will be the first person to admit that everything that happened to him with Fan Forstick, not his fault. Would the final movie that he would have gotten to make been any good? Who knows? He's definitely got this weird obsession with body horror that I don't necessarily know works in today's environment, only because I haven't seen a filmmaker that's been able to kind of capture that really as well since Cronenberg. And I do personally think that despite him drawing all this unnecessary attention to himself on Twitter, I do still think that he has a good movie left in him to make. But this movie was not it. Of all the movies that I saw this year, and like I said, there weren't as many that I thought wasted my time. This was probably the only one where I was actively saying what the fuck to myself throughout the entire movie, and afterwards questioned my very love of movies. And those are usually the movies that I reserve for my number 1 worst of the year. The movie which stars Tom Hardy as Al Capone in the final years of his life, suffering from an advanced form of syphilis that's reached his brain, wandering around his mansion, talking in an intonation that sounds something like a mix between a Muppet and a zombie. And infamously, yeah, no, the sad part is that I can even kind of understand why Trank would have been attracted to a story like this, because it's taking a very famous American icon and examining a part of their life that for the most part, I don't think too many people are really familiar with. I don't think too many people were even aware that Al Capone ever got out of jail. I certainly didn't know. But for Josh Trank to take that and turn that movie into this, which at times felt like a horror movie, at other times felt like a weird revenge porn movie, at other points felt like a really weird snuff film. Yeah, this movie just, among everything else, had no idea what it was doing. This is without an award, the worst movie that I've seen this year, and one of the worst movies I may have ever seen in my entire life. I could not recommend it less. I couldn't even give this movie a full 1 star. Couldn't even give it a full 1 star. And that was it, people. Those were my official Movie Nerd Reviews top 10 worst movies of 2020. What did you guys think? What were your top 10 least favorite movies of 2020? Whatever they are, leave them in the comment section below. Let me know any other topics that you would like to see me cover personally this year on the Talkin TV channel. Click that subscribe button, click the bell next to it. That way you get notified every time we put up new content, and click that little like button. That just helps us out overall. Make sure you follow us on our Facebook and Instagram pages at Talkin TV Podcast, and also be sure to tune in the next couple weeks to see our favorite TV shows and movies of 2020. We'll see you guys next time, and as always, watch more fucking movies.